This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm Brian's friend, James Whittingham. James Whittingham.
Whittingham.
It's good to talk to you today, Brian. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
Everything's fine up here on my second floor. It's much cooler down in your bomb shelter, I imagine, but I'm on a second story and it's getting hot. We're recording in the afternoon this week and, I've got a fan pointed right at me.
Yeah, well, I did want to talk about the heat wave that we've been having, and I think the other big news is the Kandi electric car, the Chinese electric car, so lots of stuff to talk about this week.
Yes. This is the show where two friends, one, a film professor, the other, who knows, get together and talk about the progress of clean energy as we race towards 2030. Your first story, Brian Stockton.
Well, my first story is, I wanted to talk about exhaust fans. I know how exciting that is.
I have always had an interest in exhaust fans, and it's not just because of my ass. It's because they seem like a good way to cool. Well, especially here in Regina. I've said it 1,000 times on every episode that we get cool here at night. We're an arid climate. It's rarely humid, although we've had some exceptions recently. There's always a few days in the summer that's humid and the temperature doesn't drop too far. But even though the days they said it wouldn't, it did. It got down to 17. So that's even a humid 17 is relatively cool if you got air flowing through your house.
Yeah, well, we've had these days where, it's been about 30 above in the daytime, but then, if it cools down at night. But yeah, so I have this system of exhaust fans, but it reminded me, I remember you told me a story one time. You had an apartment behind the Golden Mile Shopping Center. And I remember you telling me the story about you had a couple of box fans to cool it off.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember that story?
Oh, well, I remember the box fans. I don't remember telling you the story. I mean, I'm sure it was colorful and well told, but I still use a box fan.
Right. Well, what I remember you telling me was you had this, small apartment.
One sucking and one blowing.
What, sucking and one blowing? Yeah, this is two giant box fans in two windows, and you could cool the place down really fast, right?
Yes. And I was on the middle floor of that building, so it still got fairly warm. Not as hot as the top floor would have been, but and that's before they got air conditioning. So they didn't bother with an air conditioner back then. I was there for 10 years, $300 a month. Thank you.
Really? 10 years? Wow,
yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of, we've been talking about efficiency in the last couple of episodes, and it's sort of, this discussion figures into that because my contention is that 99% of the time, like in our climate, you just don't need central air. But we have had this heat wave where you get about 3 days in a row, that's when it starts to get too hot in my house. But the rest of the time, you can cool it off by just keeping the windows closed during the day when it's hot. And then as soon as it starts to cool down, I've got a couple of exhaust fans, and you blow the hot air out at night. You cool it down as much as possible overnight, and it, keeps the house pretty cool during the day.
Have you measured the electricity use of those exhaust fans? I know it's a lot less than an air conditioner, but how much?
No, I haven't measured it, but yeah, it's way, way less than an air conditioner for sure. But I think houses around here, they should really come with some kind of exhaust fan. Like I dream of installing a proper one. Like the ones I have are sort of jury rigged, but if you go to Princess Auto, they sell these giant barn exhaust fans, and that's the kind of thing I really want in my house.
Oh, I don't think anybody actually has one of those. See, the thing, Brian, is it wouldn't take much of an exhaust fan. Now, what happens is you put it in the highest point of your house, the highest point, and all the hot air goes up there, and it blows out the roof, and that therefore creating a vacuum in the house and pulling air in all your windows, any windows that are open. And so it's a constant exchange between the hottest air leaving your house and cool air coming in all orifices, as it were. I'm wondering about that. How expensive would that be to add to a building code when we're in a state here of needing? We don't have a big air conditioner use here, but other places would. Mm-hmm. And if that's part of your building code, it's got to be $150, $200 for the fan. You throw some wire up there, you cut a hole in your roof. They're cutting holes in the roof anyway for vents. I guess it's got to have a tube to a vent in your ceiling usually, unless you have a vaulted ceiling. But yeah, it seems like that would be the best place to do it. And Yeah. And I really like that idea.
The main thing I think is for me would be insulation in the winter. And I wouldn't want to have the exhaust fan in the attic because the attic is a separate zone. So I want an exhaust fan in the main part of the house. So you'd then have to worry about insulation in the winter because you don't want all that cold air coming in where the fan is.
Right. Right. I guess that would be an issue in our climate, wouldn't it? There would be a sort of a gap for insulation, but a solvable problem nonetheless.
Yeah, because these big barn fans that I'm talking about, they're normally go in a barn and you don't have to worry about heating the barn usually. So, but that's the kind of mechanism I want. But yeah, there was another story on Electrek this week about just these issues of efficiency. And because during the pandemic, everyone's staying home more. So suddenly everyone's realizing, oh crap, we got to cool our houses during the day when normally we're at work. And so everybody's utility bills are kind of going up during the pandemic. So people are looking for ways to, cut those back.
If you're living paycheck to paycheck and suddenly, I can imagine in a lot of places in the United States where they're undergoing a heat wave, which occasionally sneaks up here, by the way. But yeah, they're under a heat dome down there. And there's a lot of places that are very hot and humid too. So yeah, that would suck. Because if you're some places electricity is very expensive, like California, and a few other jurisdictions in the States. And so if it goes up a lot, then that's pretty significant. Because air conditioning does use a lot of.
Yeah. And the world, of course, has been getting more and more air conditioning over the last few decades. So yeah,
particularly
things.
India, which is a hot place. I understand. I haven't been. They have a burgeoning middle class that is expanding rapidly. And what do they want? The first thing you buy is air conditioning, whether it's a box unit or a central air, or a building that has central air in it. So yeah, air conditioning and it's going to run 24/7 there. People are going to want it all the time in a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of areas of the world where the 6 months of the year, it's hot night and day.
And that brings me to the next sort of efficiency discussion, which was about water heaters. Watched a good video this past week on YouTube, the Matt Reisinger YouTube channel, where he's comparing the 5 best heat pump electric water heaters. And I replaced my water heater a couple of years ago, and I thought about getting a heat pump water heater, but there wasn't that many available. They were very expensive. But I kind of regret that now because this video does a nice breakdown of a heat pump electric water heater should be cheaper to operate than a gas one.
Really?
They're just so efficient. Yeah, I was a little unsure about that because I knew that heating water with electricity is also it's like air conditioning. It uses a lot of power.
It's very inefficient, the most inefficient way to heat water.
Yeah, so I didn't want to get electric because I didn't want to put my electricity bill way up, and I don't quite have enough solar panels to cover it. But I did consider the heat pump. But like I say, it was a couple of years ago. There wasn't that many available. But I'm here to tell you, heat pump water heater is almost certainly the way to go.
Now, is anybody making them, or they must be starting at a high price and expected to go down, I'm imagining?
Yeah, so the ones that this guy covers are a couple $1,000s, which is definitely a lot more than like a typical gas. And there's not that many available, around where we are, but it's definitely coming. It costs you more upfront, but they just use way less energy, including less than natural gas.
How does it work? Do they have a tank that it goes into and circulates through the heat pump, which is external of the tank?
There's a couple of different designs, but it's basically just a compressor. It's just an air conditioner that runs in reverse somehow. And it takes that heat and compresses it. And, I don't know how it works. I have no idea.
So are they starting to make these because of the climate crisis and the demand for, cleaner houses and living?
I would think so. Yeah. This is driven by consumers who want cleaner houses for sure.
Are these new though? Like, they're just brand new? So maybe, water heaters can cost $1,000, the better ones. Yep. So you have $1,000 to cover over the lifetime of the unit. So I'm wondering how long it would last. I mean, my air conditioner outside, my central air conditioner has got to be 30 years old. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, and there is still like different sizes and different price ranges. So there was some that are even like $3,000 or $4,000, but it's like it should last forever, supposedly.
Yeah.
The other thing is, of course, tankless water heaters. And a friend of mine was looking into getting a tankless water heater, but the issue in our region is that the water coming into the house is so damn cold. The water pipes in where we are, they're buried quite deep. And as we know, it's quite cold here, under a certain depth, it always stays cold. So when the water coming into your tankless water heater is super cold, you need a much more powerful tankless water heater. So those ones are iffy around here. And then I think our friend Don has a system where he has a preheater like your pool heater. So the water is preheated before it goes into your tankless
By the sun?
system. By the sun. So I think if you're going tankless, that's probably the way to do it around here. But again, the heat pump water heater is probably the way to go.
I never could get an answer from my solar installer on how well water heaters did in the wintertime. I've seen a few of them around town. And keep in mind, our place here gets, in the Canadian prairies, gets down to 30, 40 below sometimes. 20 is not uncommon, Celsius below. So that's pretty cold. And I looked at tankless water heaters probably 15 years ago and got excited about them. And but it was also the energy savings isn't that great because natural gas is so cheap that and the tanks are getting better insulated and stuff like that. That I understand that they're not terribly popular. I mean, every store like Lowe's here and Home Depot have them. They'll have 2 or 3 models in stock and have for probably 10 years. And they have come down in price a little bit. Now, I've also been excited about, since this might be getting too late because we've had a family for a while, but if you're starting a family, one of those heat recovery, what is it? The pipe, the drain pipe heat recovery things.
Yeah.
You have that preheats it too. That's not what Don has.
Right.
So he has a solar heat preheating, right?
I think so. Yeah.
But that would work better maybe with a tankless heater in tandem, because the water going into whatever heater you're using gets preheated by the water going down the drain as you shower. It recovers some of that through copper pipes wrapped around the drain pipe. And they're not that expensive. There used to be a rebate for them, actually, but I think they're about $500 and up now. And But if we get rebates for all this stuff, if we're trying to work towards our Paris Accord agreement and keep that 2 degrees Celsius target, then we have to do things like this, especially in Canada, where we don't have a lot of options. Hopefully, air conditioners will become a little more efficient, and the heat recovery or the heat pumps will become more efficient, and there'll be a little bit breakthrough in stuff like that. I want to go on a little bit about that, because I was reading an article, and I have to say that I don't fully understand it. But the Carbon Tracker, which is a sort of a Twitter account that I've been following in an organization, they're saying that for us to maintain our climate goals, oil has to stay at $40 a barrel or lower. So what they're saying is, through the various mechanisms that I don't fully understand, is if oil goes above $40, then things aren't working well. So it's a sort of a target, and that's kind of where oil is right now. They shoot up to 70, it's no good. Basically, it's just a way for us to gauge things. If oil stays below $40 a barrel, then the demand on it through fuel efficiency and regulation and transport becoming electrified, then we know it's working. So Europe recently has come up with sort of not a bailout, but a sort of a stimulus package, I guess, for the COVID hit we've all been taking. And instead of loosening fuel efficiency standards like the U.S. did, and which they were lobbied to do by automakers, we're having hard times, please loosen those fuel efficiency standards, and thus bailing out the combustion engine for the pandemic, they are doubling down on electric transport. France put 8 billion euros into an attempt to become the world's biggest EV maker, which I don't think they're going to do, but good for them for trying. And they have a €7,000 purchase incentive as part of their COVID stimulus package, which is new for EVs. And Germany followed suit, and they've doubled their EV purchase incentives. And they've also, as we've talked about before, required petrol stations to install EV charging capacity. So this is what I'm hoping to see, and I know you are too, is when it comes to stimulus to get back to normal again, we should be putting this in the right place, and that is clean energy.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that that's going to happen, because there's going to need to be money flowing to keep everything running, and it just makes sense that it be green, since we need to do this stuff anyway.
Absolutely, Brian. And I also saw on the internet that the Hyundai Kona cost per 100 kilometers in Australia, this was an Australian article, but it's interesting for comparison purposes, costs $432 per 100 kilometers to own. And your Tesla Standard Range Plus is $4.13. Have you seen any figures like that? So it's slightly cheaper, and it's one of the cheapest vehicles. The Ioniq is the cheapest to own and operate, but it's not that different than the Tesla, actually. And that's including the purchase price.
Right. Well, and that's based on, purchase price and efficiency of the vehicle. But that's why I like the car that I bought, and that's why I like the Kona and the Ioniq, is that they're the most efficient cars you can buy. You can get longer range cars, and Tesla makes longer range cars, but then the car gets heavier, and then it's not as efficient. So here, according to rules in Canada, or the way they measure it in Canada, the Model 3 Standard Range Plus is the most efficient car in Canada.
We should be doing a live show on the battery day for Tesla. It's a huge thing, and this is what we're all hoping for and expecting, is a energy density breakthrough announcement of an improvement. They've almost come out and said it, that the price and energy density will be improving on these batteries. This is something that happens incrementally in a small way, year after year, but they're talking about new technology that does a bigger job of that. So you get that range without that extra weight, because it punishes you when you have that extra weight to have that less efficiency. So it's huge. It's huge for everything. It's huge for energy storage. It's huge for things like air travel, small planes and such, I think.
Yeah, I tend to think that I'm not sure it's going to be a huge increase in density. It's been ticking along at a sort of a few percent improvement every year. To me, it's more just about the cost and about capacity, that they got to be making enough of these. And if there is a higher energy density battery, it's going to start out probably being more expensive and going to stay in the more expensive vehicles. But it's all good. It's all moving forward.
And speaking of your friend at Toronto, Cleanhead on Twitter has posted a story for us. He says, Canadians love the Tesla Model 3. There are 618% more on the roads in BC compared to last year. Can you believe that?
Yeah, well, having been in BC, I can believe it. There's Teslas everywhere out there.
But that's ridiculous, though. I mean, doubling is ridiculous, but it's 618%. I know BC has improved their rebate, but it's not that much different.
No, the provincial rebate actually came down a bit because the federal one came into effect. So they've had a provincial rebate for a few years now that was quite generous. And then when the federal one came in, they cut the provincial one back a bit. But the total is quite high because you can get both.
Do you know what it is offhand? Is it 10 grand or more?
I think it's $8,000. I think it's 5 from the federal and then 3 provincial, something like that.
Which is almost half of what it probably used to be. Maybe.
Yeah, no, but with $8,000 off of a Tesla Model 3, I would recommend everybody in BC buy one.
And I've heard some complaints on Twitter. I saw an interaction with Elon Musk saying, all of our superchargers are full. We need support here. And he said it's on the way. He always says it's on the way, and it usually is, but it takes time. Hopefully they'll, I was thinking bad things about Tesla for that, but now that I see 618% change in 1 year, I think we can all understand how Tesla maybe fell behind on building up their supercharger network there, because that would probably even surprise them and knock their pants off. Do you have any other major stories this week, Brian?
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk a bit more about my trip to BC because I found busy chargers in Hope and in Merritt because it was the weekend. The other ones, the other stops were fine. But yeah, there was a couple of things from the trip I wanted to talk about. First of all, I haven't finished the video yet.
Damn it!
Get off my back.
Good.
It turns out even doing a crappy job of a video like that is really hard. And I'm determined to do a crappy job because I don't want this to take forever. But yeah, even a crappy job takes a long time. I have all this footage because I started hitting save on the dash cam, right?
Right.
So I thought, I can use the car to capture footage, but this just means I've got 1,000 different clips of video. When you save the dash cam footage, it breaks it into 1-minute segments for some reason. So instead of just saving 10 minutes, it saves 10 clips at 1 minute each from all 4 cameras. So, you get like 40 or 50 clips. So it's taken me a while to get through, but yeah, there was one thing from the trip I wanted to mention that I forgot. I was driving through the mountains one day and it was foggy and it was fairly long into the morning. So it was nice and bright out. And of course the car, like most cars, has an automatic setting for the headlights, right? Like you just put the headlights on auto and then, when it gets dark, they just come on. But what I noticed was that the headlights seemed to be off because it was bright out. And then it got foggy and the headlights came on even though it was still bright out. So I think that there's artificial intelligence at play there, whereas most cars would just have a light sensor. It seemed like the Tesla detected that it was fog and turned the lights on.
Impressive. Could it be that it did not see the lines on the road as clearly as it wanted to, whether it was using that feature or not?
Maybe that's a reason. Possibly.
Okay.
Although then that would mean driving in Saskatchewan, the lines are so terrible. That would mean the headlights might be coming on all the time, but I haven't noticed that.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about from your trip?
The regen going through the mountains. I was going to mention that. It was really fun to watch the range of your car go up when you're driving. Yeah. On a couple of those big mountain passes, you're going down, and one time it jumped a full 5 kilometers on the range.
Okay. That's pretty impressive because, I like regen, and they're even making improvements in regen a little bit.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, there's always more you can do with software on that for sure. Again, it's about efficiency.
Did it enhance your up and down mountainous experience by having regen as far as the driving goes?
Well, not really, just because I've got the cruise control on anyway, so it's
just doing its own thing.
It's just doing its own thing, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I found in the Prius that sometimes if you're going downhill, you didn't have to hit the brakes. It just, you could put it into a deep regen mode and it would just automatically slow down and not take off on you, I guess. Anyway, it looks like, and hopefully we can report on this sooner, but Bloomberg is reporting that the EU, not you, but the EU is aiming to actually boost the percentage of energy that it gets from renewables. In other words, their targets. They're getting way more aggressive with their targets, or talking about it, and it sounds like it's going to happen by 2030, greatly increasing it by 32% over what they originally had. So, they're changing their roadmap to 2050 and realizing that clean energy from wind and solar and battery storage is so cheap and so doable, and the grid can in fact handle it. Thank you, SaskPower, our local utility, who says it can't. And I guess our SaskPower is more worried about everybody having solar and having free electricity. That's what they basically came out and said that. Everybody else would have to raise their bill, and well, that's what we're doing. We're trying to have a tax, and we have to all do things, Brian. We have to, even you. How was your solar this year? I had a record July.
Yeah, it was weird. This, I guess it's time now for Clean Energy Pet Peeves segment.
Oh, you're going to join in on it. I'm so happy to have
Yes, I
company.
am. Although, I realized it's kind of a lot like the First World Problems segment.
Well, we
There's
have to
not a lot of
differentiate
difference
it.
there.
It'll have a different theme song
Yeah.
when everything comes together.
But my Clean Energy Pet Peeve is I was watching my solar numbers for July, and it was heading towards a record. And then something changed in the software, and suddenly the next day it went down. So I ended up with not a record July, and I'm very confused because it's just numbers. Like you have a figure every day and it adds them up and it makes you a graph. So I don't know what happened, but I did not get a record July.
Well, yeah, you always worry about when you get solar that the efficiency goes down a little bit every year. And then when you hit 25 years, it's like, sort of the end of its useful life, although ostensibly still working. But yeah, the weather, it was lots of sunshine this July, even though it was warm weather. And I have 3 Julys now, and it was slightly better than my last 2. So that's always encouraging when that happens. Had a good May too.
Okay, so here's my other clean energy pet peeve.
Okay, you got 2.
So
No.
as you know, my bike was stolen in Vancouver.
Yes.
And so I've been thinking about buying a folding e-bike. I'm feeling like this is the solution for me, is a folding e-bike.
I was going to ask, Brian, is this going to push you towards an e-bike even faster during this tragic loss for your bike?
Yes. And I found 2 that I want to buy that are in my price range. They're like, I'm looking for something fairly specific. I want something fairly light. And I found 2 that were reasonably priced, but they're both Indiegogo campaigns and neither one of them ships to Canada.
The age-old problem of shipping to Canada, it goes back for generations. And we're finally starting to get over it. And now this.
One of them keeps advertising in my Instagram feed, and it doesn't make any sense because I can't buy it. Why do they keep advertising?
You're spending money on advertising that's not going to produce anything. I hate that.
It's bizarre.
All right, now it's time for my pet peeve. Brian and I created this segment last week because I had 2 pet peeves. I put one in my pocket for this week. The other pet peeve I have is, and this is going to shock you at first. You're gonna say, "What?" Your eyebrow is going to go up. LED lights.
Yeah?
Yeah, well, they're too bright.
What?
They're too bright outside.
What are you talking
The world
about?
is going to LED lights. Now, the biggest example of this is cities in Europe. The early adopters of LED lights had a very white, bluish, cool wavelength because they were cheaper, and that's what the technology was. And nobody likes that because, well, for one reason, it keeps you up at night. If you're driving home, it wakes you up. The blue light wakes you up. If it's shining in your window, it keeps you from sleeping and causes problems like that. But the other problem is that it bounces off the ground more and up into space, into the sky, and for light pollution. So, so they corrected that after half these cities are in Europe or the centers of them are all bright blue color and overly lit. But the school that I live across from, I have a pipeline easement adjacent to my backyard fence, which is nice. It's a field. Then there is a little park and a school. And the school, there's always ne'er-do-wells back there, always. Your preteen people who are getting together, are not preteen, but 13, 14 type of thing. They're my friend John said he smoked a joint back there when he was a kid. And that was many years ago, believe me. So, Brian, my pet peeve is actually the lights on the school. Because of these ne'er-do-wells, they've... You don't remember the movie Close Encounters? When they set up for basically lights like that. They've lit the entire area as if to receive a UFO driven by a blind alien, because these are so bright that my whole window lights up at night. And
oh God,
there'll be nobody smoking pot back there, I assure you. Or kids go there to make out and all kinds of things. It's just nasty business. Parents, keep an eye on your children. So that's what's going on. They switch from old-fashioned lights. They switch from old-fashioned lights to LED lights, which is great, but they're too bright. And here's another thing, Brian. I'm going to keep going with this. My neighbors the types that vote right wing and are afraid of people with pigment in their skin coming to hurt them keep lights on at night. And because LEDs are so cheap to run, I mean, as much as little as a tenth of what incandescents were, or at least a fifth, then they're just leaving lights on all night everywhere. It's bright, and it's creating light pollution, and it's unnecessary. So that's my pet peeve. We're starting to get LED lights replaced in our neighborhood, like new lights are LEDs, and they're actually a little underperforming, I think, but that's a good thing.
Well, I would like to quit my job and become a professional light bulb consultant because it's a topic I'm quite obsessed with. And in fact, as I'm sitting here in the bomb shelter, I was an early adopter of some LED bulbs by the company called Cree. And I've got one left because they were not very good, and it's starting to flicker here in the bomb shelter. So, but I complain about this all the time. Like, LED streetlights are fantastic unless you pick the wrong kind, you pick ones that are too cheap, or you pick ones that don't have the right shade on them. It's a real problem if you don't do it right. And I think most of the time they're also too bright. And they could dim them, right? Like they could put these on dimmers. I have LED bulbs just on like porch lights outside on my house. And I've found like there's 60-watt equivalents. And I've found that at night, I only have to have them at about 50% power. Like that's all you need. Like when it's nighttime, just a little bit of illumination is perfectly fine.
I've got a smart bulb on my front porch, and I don't usually have it on, but when I'm on vacation, I will play with my smart bulbs throughout the house and create random scenarios. Because I've got nothing better to do while I'm on vacation. Sometimes I put it down to like 10%, which is as low as it goes. But even that, does the job really. And the streetlights people worry about crime and, getting mugged if you're out of the streetlight, direct rays, I guess, if you can say that. And so that's what they were touting, the ones in Europe, they spill everywhere. They spill into the back alleys, so you can't get mugged. Well, I say just don't walk in the back alleys, and we only need a certain amount of light, and it's probably more than we need.
Yeah, and I think they could probably be programmed so that like maybe at dusk they come on at 100%.
Sure.
But then they could slowly, you could fade them out, and by 3 a.m, you could probably have most streetlights at 25%, and it would be totally fine.
I mean, the drunks are going to crash anyway, right?
Exactly.
So who cares? I don't know. It's just a thought. Just a thought, my friends.
Yeah, we had, there's a streetlight pretty much right in front of our house, and it was burnt out for several months, or was broken for several months. And it was great because it was like, I don't know, like it's if you're awake at night, it's too bright. Like unless you have the blinds fully closed, you got all that light streaming in from the streetlight. So we preferred it when it was broken.
Yeah, it's kind of spooky. There was a power outage just on our block a little while ago, and it was weird to see. It was kind of spooky, but it was a full moon night too, so you could actually see quite well. Maybe they need less light on nights where there's a full moon. Just a thought, just throwing it out there. All right, Brian, Kandi, this is your big story of the week, has launched the cheapest EV in the U.S., and it is only, wait for it, everyone, wait for it, sit down if you're not sitting down right now, after rebates and incentives, $13,000. Your thoughts, Brian Stockton?
Yeah, so technically it's just over $20,000, which isn't particularly cheap, but
sure it is. For an EV, it's cheap. I mean,
for an EV, it's cheap. I also just watched, there's a new video from the Fully Charged YouTube channel where they went to an auto show in China, and it's not just Kandi. There's there's many other lower cost Chinese EVs, not available, in North America right away, but lots of them in that same price range as the Kandi. So I think what we talked about is probably going to come true, is that there's going to be Tesla, and then there's going to be Chinese companies, and everyone else is going to go out of business.
And I know people are saying, I'm not going to buy a Chinese-made car any more than I'm going to buy a pizza cutter at the Dollarama.
Yeah.
I bought a pizza cutter at the Dollarama. I'm still working. I shouldn't have used that as an example. It's a terrible example for my point. But
Yeah.
yes, I mean, I've said this before. They've had designers from Germany, from other major automotive companies. Some of them are working on these designs, and yes, they're a little bit different. The styling is culturally pinned to China, but most of them, a lot of them, the ones that are selling here, look very mainstream and not that bad looking. Of course, it remains to be seen how good they are, but $20,000, and it always bugs me because the States has always had this rebate that for $7,000. So yeah, Tesla lost that because they sold too many cars and they used up that rebate and has never been renewed, unfortunately. But we'll see.
Yeah, there was a cap on how many you could sell, and they sold a lot, but it doesn't seem to be hurting their sales, so they're doing okay.
So what do you think about this car? Like, what do you know about it?
I don't know much about it other than the story I read on Electrek, but I think, yeah, if it was available, I would consider it. It's sort of like that or getting a used Leaf. It's in that same kind of range for distance and same kind of range for price as a used Leaf as well. So, yeah, it's going to take a long time, I think, for consumers to warm up to, especially new car brands. Like people still are suspicious of Hyundai and Kia because, when those companies first started here in North America, yeah, the cars were kind of cheap. They were kind of crappy. They've been fantastic for years now, and yet people still tend to have a negative attitude about them.
Yeah.
So, it's all coming.
Yeah, it'll take a while. I mean, people are buying those cars quite actively now. You see them everywhere. But yeah, there are still people who have hesitation about it. If you look at the list, and people do research nowadays, even stupid people will do research before spending all that money on a car, you can see easily that the Hyundai and Kias are better than many other North American automakers on the reliability list. So this car is 4 doors. It's small. It is kind of funny looking, and yeah. But I mean, if you're an American or a European, there's similar incentives there. You're going to pay 13,000 euros for it, roughly, or 13,000 American dollars, roughly. Then that is a bloody cheap car. That's new, and then these get on the used market too, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. I mean, high school students will be able to buy this in 8 years. It'll be fabulous. Everybody be driving electric.
Yeah, and that's one thing we don't quite have here is much of a robust used EV market, whereas in a place like California, there's quite a lot of choice, and the prices are quite good.
Yeah, so they do have a more expensive $30,000 version that has 180 miles of range. The other one just has 110 miles of range, which ain't much, or it's around that. Yeah. But it's a city car, obviously. It's a hatchback with 4 doors that has a, it's small. It'd be like a Spark, a Chevrolet Spark or something like that. But a usable car. And if you're a single person, or you live in Europe and you have small streets to work with, this is a very compelling vehicle. Plus, as you said, there's many more of them on the way. Do you have anything else, Brian, before we get to the, dare I say it, lightning round?
Yes, I have one thing I was going to ask you about the audio clip that you played on last week's episode, because when we record these episodes, stuff like audio clips are put in afterwards. So you set up this audio clip, and it was supposed to be comparing the noise of an EV bus to a diesel bus or something?
Inside, yes.
Inside. Anyway, I don't know. I listened to the episode and I was confused by what the clip was. And of course, in the episode, I say, "Oh, that's great," or something, but I had not heard it.
So
I just played along.
You lied to us last week.
I lied to you, but still, wasn't it supposed to be a comparison between EV and diesel?
Yeah, well, there was the comparison within the clip. Halfway through the clip, it switched to diesel, and it was much louder. If you have a full range of hearing, my friend, which you may not
hear a difference.
Okay.
I don't know. It all sounded the same to me.
I'm sure if you look hard enough in the specs, that you're not going to kill it.
upgrade your Dollar Tree earpods then, for God's sake, man.
Okay.
I'm putting that on you because it was fairly obvious to me. If anyone listening wants to pipe in, please, this is your time to do it, because is Brian right or am I right? And let's hear from the listeners. By the way, Brian, I looked up stats because Google sent me an email about our podcast that they're changing things around. And by the way, this podcast show that I listened to from Libsyn, which is not our host, but is the host of my other podcast, Sneeze, they have a very good inside podcasting podcast that comes up bi-monthly. They said that basically Android listeners are only 1% of podcasts right now, even though
still
the Google Podcast app has been around for over a year. There's not actually a native app on Android, so you don't have it with your phone automatically. So they figure it's still mostly Apple. It's ridiculous. It's like 66% are on Apple iTunes are listening to podcasts. Basically, and everything else is Spotify's like 8% or something like that, even though they're trying to get into the game. Anyway,
right.
I found out through looking into that we have one listener who listens on a Google smart speaker.
One listener.
That we know of.
Okay. Well, special shout out to whoever is listening on a Google smart speaker.
And to that person, I say, hey, Google, set the thermostat to 95 degrees. I apologize for that. He's running to his thermostat right now. He or she. Okay, Brian, it's time for the lightning round. The lightning round created by me several weeks ago reads clean energy and clean tech headlines to Brian to get his opinion. Now, he does not know the headlines in advance. Sometimes I don't. I just want to point that out. So, Brian, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you sure you're ready?
I'm sure.
Are you sure? Do you have a notepad handy or anything like that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'm just going to throw one because I went live to a site here that says the Audi E-Tron 2021 electric SUV gets a $9,000 price cut and 18 more miles of range. That's encouraging. When you lock $9,000 off of anything, it's and you want the EVs to go down in price, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, but it sounds like it's an okay car, but it could use a bit more range and a lower price, so great.
Okay. Well, apparently, British Petroleum, BP, is going to cut fossil fuel production and invest billions in green energy. I guess my question to you is, do you believe it?
Well, yeah, sort of. I mean, I'm not all that familiar with BP, but, the smart energy companies know that they're energy companies, and that doesn't have to come from oil and gas. So, yeah, the smart energy companies will shift things over to clean sources. Why not?
Right. Tesla still might move out of California, Elon Musk warns. What's the deal with that?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon because they need the production capacity. They're still production constrained. But probably Elon is salivating over how good the new gigafactories are going to be. They've been in California a long time. That was sort of a jury-rigged factory. It was their first one. They had to, they bought it from Toyota or something, and they had to kind of remake it. So now they've got these gigafactories going up in Texas and Berlin. He'd probably just rather be there making cars. So, I could see it happening eventually just because these new factories are going to be better.
Okay. BMW, of all people, is developing an interesting electric scooter with a roof, airbags, and active aerodynamics, which means, I'm guessing, it'll change the aerodynamics like through flaps or something. Have you heard that one?
I guess so. Yeah, I briefly looked at that story. It's not a vehicle I'm particularly interested in, but there are already sort of vehicles like that in Europe. I don't know if I've ever seen any here, but they have sort of semi-covered scooters or motorcycles in Europe already.
All right. Tesla's wiper controls are ruled illegal in Germany after someone crashed while using them, and then he went to sue the government for giving him a ticket. Have you had any problems with the wiper controls?
Yes. One time I got confused using them. Now that I know, it's a bit like when you're operating system on your phone gets updated and you forget how to do something, or, it's kind of like that. But there's a default backup, like you can press the button on the end of the stalk to make the wipers go. So if you ever get confused, you can do that, assuming you don't forget, right? Because you can forget how these things work. I think it's a quasi-legitimate complaint that all the controls, for like wipers it is an important safety thing. So they maybe should have made all the controls for that a hard button. But there is, like I say, sort of a backup hard button that you can press. So it is a little confusing. I will give them that.
It's always evolving with software updates too, and they always put out little improvements to their cars that aren't major, that don't affect the manufacturing process that much. So who knows? They could be, the people think there's a conspiracy too of Germany trying to get them not to sell any cars there, but that's another story for another day.
I will say too that I leave the wipers on auto all the time, and it works really great. The automatic sensing for the wipers is fantastic.
I have that on my 2003 Acura SUV that I use for towing, except there's a crack in the windshield, and it messes with it a bit. So every time I turn right on a sunny day, it goes on with one wipe.
That's funny.
It's like, oh yeah, I turned right. That's why I went on. Okay, so Benchmark Minerals, which is another people I follow on Twitter because they seem to be on top of the whole battery game and the supply of batteries and minerals for those batteries, are saying that 158 battery mega factories are going to be in existence or plan to be in existence by 2029. That's 8.5 years from now. And we're talking, the size of a mega factory in Nevada that Tesla has, like a big factory putting out, untold megawatts of electricity storage every year. 158 of them are planned for not 2050, not 2060, but 2029, which is just 8.5 years from now.
Yeah, every time you turn around, there's some announcement from somebody with a battery factory. So, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's batteries are the new oil.
And they keep saying that they keep having to readjust their predictions upwards because things keep changing that fast. That's what you like to see. That's how solar took off and things like that. Okay, Brian, in June, the Tesla Model 3 outsold the Hyundai Kona Electric in Korea. In Korea, Hyundai's and Kona's own backyard. A shock in a country where consumers are presumed to have a strong preference for domestically produced products. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think, Hyundai, they're just not making enough of them. And that's the thing about Tesla is they've, always got supply. I mean, maybe not in every country because they've got to make them in California and ship them around the world. But Tesla's happy to sell you a car and not everyone else has the supply.
Yeah. So are they screwing us because they really don't want to make EVs, or do they not have the battery supply?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I've always been kind of confused about that, but yeah, I don't know.
All right, Brian. One more thing for you. Are you ready? Tesla.
I'm ready.
Equals 19% of the global plug-in vehicle market. The Tesla Model 3 had nearly 4 times as many sales as the second best electric vehicle in the world in the first half of 2020. And remember, there's a pandemic, in case you've forgotten. And more sales than the second best, third best, fourth best, fifth best selling, and sixth best selling plug-in vehicles combined, the Tesla Model 3.
Yeah, well, it's really my same answer from the last question. It just, it has to do with supply. I think Hyundai could challenge with the Kona if they were making more of them, but they're not.
Really, Brian, Tesla has moved the needle on this. And if it wasn't for Tesla, and yes, kudos to Elon Musk for pulling this off, because honestly, where would we be without Tesla in the electrification of transportation? Where would we be? People would be, I mean, they're getting their asses kicked in, they're looking bad. Every car commercial you see now for a car brand has a couple of shots of somebody plugging in one of their vehicles that they don't want to sell just to make, see, we're keeping up. Yeah. We're a modern company. Yeah, don't worry about that, but buy our combustion vehicles, please. And thank God for Tesla. Brian, the Clean Energy Show, which is what you're listening to now, everyone. We want to hear from you, as always, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Cleanenergyshow, one word, @gmail.com. Send us an email. We love nothing better than hearing from our listeners.
No, I think there's just one.
Hello, everyone. Yeah. Meow. Does he have a cat? Meow. See, the cat's walking up to the smart speaker now saying, is that another cat? That's a really good cat impersonation. Clean Energy Pod, one word, on the Twitter. There you can DM us. You can tweet at us like Cleanhead did already this week. Give us some feedback. Keep it coming. And speakpipe.com. You can record. And people have done this. People have recorded messages for us to play right on the show. And that's even better because that's like content. We love playing clips, although they tend to confuse Brian. We don't have any clips this week, Brian. I'm very disappointed that we don't have any clips. Yeah, I don't have nothing. I could play a clip from last week's show where you lied about the pretending to hear that clip. That could be a clip. Let's go to that clip now. The electric bus is a lot more quiet. Brian?
That was amazing.
See, you're a filthy liar. It's shame on you.
Oh.
Shame on you. Very convincing, though. Anyway, Brian, it's been fun, and we'll see you once again. Where? On the Clean Energy Show.
See you next week.